Meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 83 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and International Development. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the standing orders, and therefore members are attending in person in the room as well as remotely using the Zoom application. I'd like to make a few comments for the benefit of the members as well as our witnesses. Before speaking, please do wait until I recognize you by name. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and do mute yourselves when you are not speaking. You may speak in the official language of your choice. Although this room is equipped with a powerful audio system, feedback events can occur. These can be extremely harmful to the interpreters and cause serious injuries. The most common cause of sound feedback, as I like to remind everyone, is an earpiece worn too close to a microphone. With regard to a speaking list, the committee clerk and I will do our best to maintain a consolidated order of speaking for all members, whether they are participating virtually or in person. In accordance with the committee's routine motion concerning connection tests for witnesses, I am informing the committee that all witnesses appearing virtually have completed the required connection tests in advance of the meeting. Now, pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motions adopted by the committee on Monday, January 31st, 2022 and Tuesday, May 30th, 2023, the committee resumes its study of the situation at the Russia-Ukraine border and implications for peace and security. I'd now like to welcome our witnesses. We have Professor Jennifer Clapp from the University of Waterloo. She had previously appeared before us, but regrettably we had connectivity problems. We also have Professor Wood from Western University. Good to see you in person, Professor. Again, our apologies for the connectivity problems last week or 2 weeks ago. In addition to that, from the Energy Council, we have Mr. Jacob Irving, who is here in person. Mr. Irving is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Energy Council of Canada. Lastly, but certainly not least, we're also grateful to have from the International Institute for Sustainable Development, Ms. Anna Ackerman, who is a policy analyst with the Green Reconstruction of Ukraine program. So each of you, and we will start with the two members who are here in person, each of you will be provided 5 minutes for your opening remarks, and then we will go to the members for questions. If you do see me holding this up, that means you're out of time, and we ask that you wrap things up within 15 to 20 seconds. And that applies not only to your opening remarks, but also to the questions that the members will put to you. So all of that having been said, we will start off with Professor Wood. The floor is yours. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you very much. It's obviously a great joy to be here. I have to say that security here, I tell you, is much tighter than the British House of Commons. I have published both on long energy transitions and on the past on war, and I'm happy to talk about either. In terms of long energy transitions, a key point is the global energy mix is changing. This is a long and very destabilizing process, but this is the way it is. Now, a couple of points which are quite salient. Obviously, actual estimates of oil and gas reserves vary hugely. Industry estimations tend to be very optimistic. It's a very simple point. The other thing is increasingly oil and gas in the world is unconventional sources. Now, the key thing about that, there has been tremendous expansion of that. That was predicated on cheap money. As we know from the US case, now that money is more expensive, unconventional oil and gas is not growing as fast as it was. I'm going to tell you a quick story before I move on to the subject of war. My mother-in-law from England came to visit us a couple of weeks ago, And growing up in rural England, she's describing in the 1940s and early 1950s, they had no electricity, no running water, still largely horses in the fields. Now, that was true for the worst of the world. The world has changed tremendously in a generation. For some people in cities, maybe 2 or 3 generations. Now, those sort of big changes, history alerts us, come at costs, and we're only becoming aware of those costs these days. I'll turn on to the subject of war. Commentators love quoting Clausewitz, and Clausewitz got wonderful one-liners, like fog of war, war is a continuation of politics. Clausewitz says lots of uncomfortable things which people like to gloss over. The first is war is a very unpleasant business. And Clausewitz was writing in the early 19th century when there was a general view you did not involve civilians in war to a large extent. That was done by professionals. Nowadays, that seems acceptable. The other point is Clausewitz argued defensive is much stronger than offensive. That favored the Ukrainians in the open stage of the war. Regrettably, it obviously favors the Russian side these days. There's a further point which is really worth considering. The recent case of Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh alerts us to the fact that countries which are reliant on great power help from the outside, if that great power help is speedily removed, the consequences can be very unpredictable. And we all know the potential radical change of US support after the next election. So this sounds very pessimistic. People love to use the analogy of the Finnish Winter War to describe Ukraine. The key difference is the Finns were very successful in keeping the casualties down. That's the first point. The second thing is that perhaps the bargaining position of Ukraine over the last few weeks has diminished. In my previous disposition, I made the point that, well, maybe it's a stalemate. And then I've saw, obviously, since then, a lot of commentators have talked about stalemate. Now, people in the US military are talking about, well, a stalemate would be a good outcome. So there's a certain degree of unpredictability. Optimism, well, under very, very bleak circumstances, Finland in 1945 managed to still secure peace with Russia. It was a very bitter pill, but nonetheless, they did preserve national independence. So very challenging times. Where does this leave Canada? Well, it's a question is, what happened to Armenia's other allies when Russia pulled the plug on it? It's a very good question. I think I've used about 4 minutes, Mr. Chair, and I won't exhaust your patience any further.
Thank you, Professor Wood. We now go to Mr. Irving. Mr. Irving, you similarly have 5 minutes for your opening remarks.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for the invitation, members of Parliament, and particularly the chair of the committee. I will confess I'm a bit of a late entrant to this committee, and my organization, the Energy Council of Canada, I often like to put it sometimes is that we are sort of an inch deep and a mile wide. We speak generally to Canadian energy, so I'm able to answer some fairly general questions about the state of energy in Canada, but more specific ones, particularly ones pertaining to the war in Ukraine. I might disappoint you a little. I just want to let you know that off the top, but I will endeavor to do my best to answer any questions you have. Je peux répondre des questions en français aussi, si vous voulez bien. But maybe what I should probably start by doing is telling you just a little bit about the Energy Council of Canada. We are a nonpartisan, not-for-profit, technology-neutral promoter of Canadian energy leadership at home and abroad. What that means is we were founded by Natural Resources Canada back in 1984. They're our founding member and remain a member with us to this day. And then the rest of our membership is made up by energy industry players from across the spectrum, from the different sectors, petroleum and electricity as well. What I wanted to talk to you about today is our relatively new program, which we call the North American and International Outreach, or NAO program, which is essentially pulling together all of the different energy players from across Canada, developing a high-level, general, neutral, and positive story about Canada's energy resources and abilities, and then communicating it to the rest of the world in a concerted fashion. And really what this has been about enlisting Canada's energy industry to communicate Canada's energy industry externally like never before. I think the way I would put it is that a lot of us are used to, when it comes to communicating Canadian energy outside our own borders, we in many ways rely on our ministers, federal and provincial, to do it for us. We're all used to Natural Resources Minister championing Canadian energy, and the various energy and mines ministers from across the country doing it as well. And this is terrific, and it is good, and it should continue. And in fact, I would like to see more of it. I'm biased in that way. Also, our national industry associations do some of this work as well. You're familiar with them. They are members with us. They're partners with us. Organizations like the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers, but then, of course, Electricity Canada, Canadian Nuclear Association, Canadian Gas Association. They are all allied with us. They're all members with us. And they do some of this work as well, but often within their own sectors and within their own spheres. You're probably used to Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers going to CERA Week once a year in Houston and making the Canadian energy argument there, or Electricity Canada having their board meeting once a year in Washington and doing that as well. And these are all excellent efforts to try and promote Canadian energy outside our borders. But it's useful to remember that their primary mandate as organizations, as industry organizations in Canada, is the development of Canadian energy within Canada. Their primary mandate is not the communication of Canadian energy outside of our borders. This is what the Energy Council of Canada has attempted to take on through its North American and International Outreach program. And to be honest with you, it's really been only in action for about a year. We built this program during the pandemic, which was actually a good opportunity to work on this, to pull everyone together and to create common messaging. But we only started delivering it this past year in person. There was no travel up until this year, really. But we've been successful. We work with Global Affairs Canada and the trade commissioners around the world, and they find opportunities for us to deliver this new concerted message, this new, I call it, positive, neutral message that communicates our energy story. And for this past year, we were in Jamaica, South Africa, Vietnam, and I recently participated in an event in Boston. And really the whole idea behind this, if I can put it sort of simply, is my perception is that for my lifetime, Canadian energy, our strategy has been deceptively simple, which has basically been, we'll make as much energy as the Americans can take. They'll take as much as we can make. No need to advertise. And that has been good. That has been great for both of our countries. It has built stability and strength on both sides of our border. But in 2013, it's no longer the case. The United States is not a dependent customer. They are a competitor with us. It's now up to us to communicate our value proposition, both in the United States to secure and maintain and grow our markets there, but also new places elsewhere. So that's a bit of an idea of where we fit into the picture. Really enjoy getting involved in the conversation more. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Irving. We will now go to Professor Clapp, who is joining us virtually. Professor Clapp, you have 5 minutes for your opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the committee for the opportunity to speak today. Previous speakers spoke about energy markets. I will be speaking about food security, and I'd like to make 3 points in relation to the global food security consequences of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And these comments are based on my own research as an academic, as well as in my role as a member of several international expert panels on food security. The first point I'd like to make is that world food security has been profoundly affected by the decline of Ukrainian grain on the world market. Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine caused significant turmoil on global grain markets, resulting in a major price spike in 2022 that was sparked by concerns about global grain supplies, especially because at the time, Russia and Ukraine together accounted for around 1/4 of the world's wheat export market and around 1/5 of the world's maize market. As a result of this market turmoil, food import bills rose sharply around the world, especially in the months following the invasion. And these price increases hit the food import dependent developing countries the hardest. And these are especially countries in sub-Saharan Africa and in the Middle East. And many of these countries relied on imports of grain from Russia and Ukraine to meet their food security needs. The result of this turmoil and price increase was a dramatic increase in global hunger. After a decade in which we saw hunger generally falling around the world, the situation reversed after 2019. The pandemic was certainly a significant reason for the increase in hunger, but so was the war in Ukraine. The UN estimates that globally, around 122 million more people faced hunger in 2022 than they did in 2019, and that today around 20 to 30 million of the people facing hunger today, which totals around 800 million people, 20 to 30 million of those people are facing hunger because of the war in Ukraine. Global grain markets today have largely adjusted to the initial shock, and the price of wheat and other grains have since receded from their high levels of 2022, but they still remain elevated. And given high levels of debt and rising interest rates, the global hunger situation remains highly precarious. The second point I'd like to make is that the Black Sea grain deal has been important, but its end has not led to further market turmoil, at least not on the same scale that we saw before. The brokering of the Black Sea Grain Initiative in July 2022 eased some of the market fears by allowing the safe export of some of Ukraine's grain via Black Sea shipping routes. And this deal is widely seen to have contributed to a decline in grain prices between mid-2022 and mid-2023. Some, but not all of that grain, went to the poorest countries in need. In July of this year, Russia pulled out of the Black Sea grain deal and wheat prices briefly rose, but have since come down again, although the world wheat market remains tight. Ukraine is now exporting much of its grain via the Danube River, and it's established its own humanitarian corridor through the Black Sea. Ukraine has pursued these alternate routes of export because its overland shipments, which occurred in the immediate aftermath of the invasion, flooded the markets of its neighbors, Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, Romania, and Bulgaria, which prompted those countries to ban the import of Ukrainian grain because it was depressing prices on their markets. And throughout this market turmoil, Russia has doubled its global grain exports since 2022. Russia is now the largest wheat exporter in the world, and it has captured some of the markets that Ukraine had previously supplied. The third point I'd like to make is that Canada can play an important role in this context by supporting developing countries that depend on food imports for their food security. Canada's humanitarian assistance and its exports of wheat on world markets have been important in helping food import-dependent countries to access the food they need in the short run. But Canada can also do more to support food deficit developing countries to sustainably increase their own food production, which is vital for long-run food security in those countries. And it's especially important to support small-scale producers who are important providers of food in those contexts. Support for food production in developing countries is important because global grain markets today are highly concentrated, which makes the trading system very vulnerable to shocks like we saw in the case of Ukraine. Just 5 exporters, Russia, the EU, Canada, Australia, and the US, account for over 70% of the world wheat trade, and maize markets are similarly concentrated. If a shock affects one or more of these exporters, there are huge food security consequences for the poorest countries via higher prices. And for these countries, encouraging them to rely on concentrated markets introduces risks, especially in an age of accelerating climate change and geopolitical conflicts, which make shocks and disruptions to markets more likely. As such, Canada can play an important role in supporting greater market diversity, including by helping the most vulnerable food deficit countries to sustainably increase their domestic food production to better enable them to weather disruptions to global grain markets caused by shocks. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Professor Clapp. We now go to our final witness for the first panel, Ms. Ackerman. The floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Hello, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me to today's hearing and for all the support Canada has given the people of Ukraine. I represent the International Institute for Sustainable Development, working from Geneva, where since last year I lead the work on a sustainable recovery of Ukraine. I also represent Ukraine's largest environmental NGO, Center for Environmental Initiatives Eco Action, as its board member and one of the founding members. I'm a Ukrainian myself with a background in energy and environmental policy, and it's these two topics, energy and environment, I would like to touch upon in my short statement today. A few days ago, Dmytro Kuleba, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, said that we are preparing for the worst winter in our history. Ukraine is a big country, and protecting the highly centralized energy system and all the power plants from Russia's terrorist attacks is a complicated task, especially without sufficient air defense. So this is a matter of our survival. But there is another midterm perspective we should also be looking at, ways to transform the Ukrainian energy system into a more decentralized and a more resilient one to avoid big future disruptions. Recently, 50 Ukrainian municipal leaders signed a letter to the US government requesting support for communities in Ukraine, especially in the form of renewable energy technologies. Indeed, we see through our work that many Ukrainian cities consider solar panels, storage systems, heat pumps as effective solutions to improve local energy security. The first pilot projects of this kind, mostly implemented with support of NGOs and international partners, started appearing around the country in autumn last year. Communities are, of course, given priority to modernizing the energy systems, which are supporting critical infrastructure facilities, such as hospitals, water supply systems, schools, and so on. However, the financial mechanisms available to implement such projects are limited for the moment, and this is where some Canadian support would be most valuable. And this transformation of the energy system, which is also embedded in the new energy strategy of Ukraine by 2050, goes beyond the centralized energy production. It's also a way to decarbonize the economy, create new jobs, and support local production of green technologies and materials, which are required for the energy transition, not only in Ukraine, but also worldwide. Since 2017, together with colleagues from Eco Action, we have been working with coal mining communities in the Donetsk region in eastern Ukraine on their just transition away from coal. Most of them were keen to see their economies diversified and transformed into more sustainable ones. The city of Vuhledar, with enough coal to last for decades, provided impressive leadership in these debates. Vuhledar now lies in ruins, completely destroyed by Russia, with its coal mines flooded, just like many neglected mines in Ukrainian territories controlled by Russia since 2014. Flooding of coal mines leads to grave consequences, including soil and water pollution and others. And the Ukrainian government estimates the overall cost to the environment from the war to be more than 70 billion Canadian dollars. And this is just since February 24th of last year. The scale of the damage is enormous, and substantial resources are, of course, needed to analyze, to monitor, and remediate the pollution, and to deal with many other types of damages to the environment. Ukraine will need significant support with this throughout the years to come. And finally, the Kakhovka Dam destruction in June 23 became one of the most consequential events in terms of the scale of its impact on people and the environment. The destruction resulted in flooded cities, hundreds of thousands of people with limited access to fresh water, mines and pollution washed into the sea, and increased risk to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant occupied by Russia, an ecocide. But the area where Kakhovka Reservoir used to be is now becoming a young forest. So this is incredible. And researchers are calling for a careful examination of options that needed for reconstruction of the dam to make sure that we don't repeat mistakes of the past and build back better. Ukrainians want to build back better. They want to rebuild, and they started rebuilding as soon as the first cities and regions were liberated in the end of last year. We want to build more sustainable future. So since Canada is already planning to assist Ukrainian communities in making an inclusive recovery, attention should also be given to ways Ukraine could transition to a green economy. Only a strong and prosperous Ukraine could provide security for its people and Europe. I thank you for your attention and glad to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ackerman. Your timing was perfect. We were just a few seconds short of the 5-minute opening remarks. So we now go to the members for their questions. We will first go to MP Hoback for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. And, Chair, I think this room makes a difference. We actually could hear and have all our witnesses.
That's right.
That's really nice to see. I want to thank all the witnesses for being here on a Monday morning on this important topic, for sure. Maybe I'll start off with you, Mr. Irving. When you talk about Canada and promoting Canadian energy abroad, you're talking nuclear, you're talking oil and gas, you're talking LNG, you're probably talking hydrogen, I assume, too, somewhere down the road. How do they fit together as we see groups and countries transition from conventional fossil fuels into more renewables? And how could Canada be part of that chain through the whole process? And are we part of that chain through the whole process now? Considering we don't really ship any LNG, U.S. ships it all now. We're not taking up the slack in a lot of those areas.
I appreciate the question because our mission as Energy Council of Canada, as I say, is we're technology neutral and positive in our communication. In that, essentially, it almost sounds simplistic, but what we're trying to do is demonstrate to the rest of the world that when it comes to energy, Canada does it all. And that is fairly remarkable for a country of our population. Maybe not necessarily our geographic size, but for our population. When you think of every single facet of energy, Canada is involved in every single one, from geothermal to tidal to all the different sources you mentioned. And we actually have strong leadership stakes in many of them. I mean, in hydropower, for example, Canada is the world's second largest generator of hydropower, just behind China.
How do we rank internationally then as we look at the conventional fuels, moving up the chain? Europe had to go to some countries like Qatar to get LNG, Algeria, Nigeria for oil and gas. How would that look like if it would have came from Canada versus those countries? How would our environmental global print look like in that scenario?
Well, one interesting thing about Canadian LNG is actually about the marriage of our different energy technologies. When you think about LNG leaving our coasts, east or west, one of the largest parts of the footprint is in the liquefaction of the natural gas. When you actually have to turn it into a liquid and put it on a ship and send it out, that's a lot of power, a lot of energy that's required to do that. Just so happens that both of our extreme coasts are predominantly hydropower. And so what it means is that we would be using non-emitting electricity to make our LNG, which means that our LNG is and would be the least emitting in the world.
So then let's go back into the well cycle, going right to the production where it's coming out of the ground, and look at methane emissions and things like that. How would that compare to Qatar or other countries where Europe is now forced to get their LNG because Canada wouldn't offer it to them?
I don't have the comparative analysis on it, but I can speak to a little bit of our progress in that. Canadian, when it comes to methane reductions, we've seen our distribution system emissions have fallen over 20% since 2000, while volumes of production have grown. And okay, that's a lot of stats and facts, but I think the message out of it is that even as we have grown natural gas production in Canada, we have reduced our emissions at it. So what does that say? To me, it says that Canada should be able to be trusted to produce more of this with less emissions, because we have a track record in doing so. The typical difficulty that Canada faces is that the world wants to see absolute emissions reductions from everybody, from Canada and from every other country. In Canada, we have a great history in per barrel, per molecule reductions, but we're being asked to deliver more, and then that risks raising.
I guess I'm just trying to compare it to the international scene. So I look at our industry, the duty to consult, the whole process that we go through. How does that compare to a country like Qatar? How does that compare to even the U.S., for example?
Well, we don't try to take on the business of comparing ourselves to other countries, but we do try to.
Well, we do have to sell our ESG. We do have to sell what we are, right?
Exactly. We do try to communicate who we are. to your point. And some of our key messages that we do, this is interesting from the industry side, is a lot of the times we do talk about the way Canada makes energy as being important. One of the things that I often like to say, Canada is a responsible energy producer because it's a responsive energy producer. We do it within the context of one of the world's oldest and most sophisticated democracies. That should count for something nowadays.
But that would explain why Europe came here first, right? That would explain why Europe came to Canada first, looking for relief from Russian oil and gas. It makes sense because if you look at how we actually conduct business, how we work through the whole supply chain. And then if you looked into the future with our nuclear technology, we look at hydro, we look at hydrogen, I should say. Wouldn't we be a natural partner? And if we would be, why aren't we?
There's a lot of great potential synergies there. And I would actually mention the reason I'm actually here in Ottawa this week is I'm attending a conference tomorrow called the 3 Seas Initiative that's put on by the government of Poland, by the Embassy of Poland. They're doing it with Macdonald-Laurier Institute. It's going to be on at 10:30 tomorrow morning at the National Arts Centre.
I only got 5 minutes, so I appreciate
that. But this is precisely the point that they make back toward Canada, is that the marriage of our values and the like should...
See, that's what kind of puzzles me, because if you tell the EU that...
Mr. Hovack, I'm afraid your 6 minutes is up.
Wow, that's fast. You got a fast watch there, Chair.
Thank you for your time. So we will next go to MP Chattel. You have 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair, and welcome to our witnesses who are here in person with us. Thank you, Mr. Wood, for finally having been able to come and see us in person. And thank you also to the witnesses who are with us virtually. My first question is for Ms. Clapp. Ms. Clapp, you have said in an article that the major agri-food industries play an important role in weakening global food security. And recently I met some citizens to speak to them about food security in Canada. There's a lot of support for the actions of our government with Bill C-56, which also aims to address problems caused by the concentration of power of the major food chains that also weaken food security here in Canada. Can you tell us concretely how these chairs reduce food security in Canada and in the world as well?
Merci.
And I presume you're talking about the food retail sector or different parts of the food supply chain. But if it's okay, I can answer generally, because a large amount of my work has been on the concentration of power among a small number of firms at various points in agri-food supply chains. And that is the case all the way from farm inputs like seeds, chemicals, machinery and fertilizer, to food production and processing, and also the international food trade, and the grain trading companies, as well as on the food retail side. So the way in which the concentration of power at these different points in the food supply chain can affect food security is because when there are just a few players on the market, they tend to have what we call market power, which enables them to have a greater degree of say over supply and demand conditions within which they operate, which enables them to, for example, pay less to suppliers at the same time that they might charge more to consumers. And this can lead to a situation where workers in the food system might be receiving less of the benefits from the system than they would otherwise, and also consumers might end up paying more out of their own pocketbooks for food. And these effects can multiply throughout the food system. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Oui, merci beaucoup.
Yes, thank you very much. And you were talking about in your introductory statement of the impact of climate change due to extreme weather events that are touching agriculture strongly, and also, consequently, world food security. So wars are caused in great part by a quest for more resources, and with climate change, food resources will be lower, also water resources. We expect an increase in wars generated by climate change. Do you believe that with climate change, wars to have access to more resources, can you think of concrete ideas, concrete solutions to help the world to decrease the causes of these wars?
For that question. Yes, indeed, the acceleration of global climate change can create or exacerbate geopolitical tensions as countries vie for access to vital resources, including resources in the food system. From my research, which has looked at problems of concentration in food systems, one of the best ways to address the problem of climate change, which can, for example, reduce the production in a particular exporting country. Take India, for example. It lost last year in an extreme heat event around 25% of its wheat crop. And it's an exporter to many developing countries. But also this year, El Nino has caused a reduction in its rice production. And as we know, India has put an export ban in place on non-basmati rice, which has led to higher prices of rice on the world market, and that directly affects food security. So one way I would argue to deal with this issue is to ensure greater diversity for resilience within global food systems. And what I mean by that is enabling more countries around the world to produce more of their own food that they consume at home in order to allow a diverse system where countries can rely not just on global markets, but also their domestic production. And I'm not saying every country should be food self-sufficient, but what we need is a system where there's a better balance between domestic production and trade. It's difficult to achieve that balance exactly, and Canada certainly plays a role in global food and grain markets. But I think there's a definite need to increase that domestic resilience and production through sustainable forms of agriculture that are more resilient to climate change.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair.
It is now your turn. 6 minutes, Mr. President.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to our witnesses for being with us today to contribute to enlighten our knowledge of the impact of war on food supply and energy supply, the Ukraine war as well. Thank you, Mr. Woods, for the patience that you manifested last time and for the fact that you came back to see us in person today. It's highly appreciated. I will start asking you questions. On October 25th, of this year, you stated that structural changes in today's world have amplified the effects of crises related to food security. You said that in the 80s there were periodic poor harvests in the former USSR, but the risk of massive famine in the world was not as high as it is now. The world system is much more vulnerable nowadays. Why is that?
By using an analogy from quantum physics, everybody's heard of Schrödinger's cat. I'll tell you in one sentence how it works. Everything is connected. The issue with climate change, it is fundamentally about the breakdown of the relationship between humanity and the natural world. Now, there are a couple of points about that which are really important. The first is interconnections can occur in unforeseen ways. If you speak to, say, volcanologists about the effect of the melting of ice caps and the weight of the Earth's crust and what this means in terms of climate change and food security. As you know, we're well aware in the 1980s, the Soviet Union had regularly had poor harvests, and a lot of the time the world economy didn't notice. So there's essentially what economists like to call omni-crisis. It's yet you have multiple crises interconnected in subtle ways. Now, the bad news is, and there's a huge body of literature on this, the human mind is wired in such a way it deals quite well with immediate, visible challenges. The human mind is not very good about dealing with large, complex, and interconnected existential challenges. However, realizing that there is this very strong interconnectedness of events, and this means we've got to be a lot more aware of what is happening in different parts of the world and trying to explore for ourselves how they are connected.
Merci infiniment. Diriez-vous...
Thank you very much. Would you say, Mr. Woods, because what you're telling us seems to be a bit counterintuitive in the sense that with the improvement of technical tools, we should expect that food production be higher. But are you saying that the improvement of our technologies has an impact on nature, which becomes at one point counterproductive and leads to a decrease in production?
The thing is, and this is again well known in the sciences, we know the immediate benefits of advances in technology. We don't know the consequences to long way along the line. I mean, Jared Diamond makes a point that when automobiles came out, everybody was relieved. You didn't have piles of horse manure and dying horses in the streets. And yet, obviously, there were subtle effects down the line. Technology has unforeseen consequences. Every technological advance has unforeseen consequences. The trouble is we don't know their consequences until a while down the line. The second thing is that technological fixes that are transformative seem to be becoming harder, and the whole range of ways you can explain that. Possibly the way the patenting system works, possibly because of crises multiplying faster than the fixes. But essentially, this makes for much unpredictability.
Diriez-vous que Malthus avait raison?
Would you say that Malthus was right to say that with population growth, we would get to a point where we wouldn't be able to feed the entire population of the world?
That's an interesting point, because obviously different people in different parts of the world have very different diets and eat different issues. However, it does feed into a point. 1 in every 5 people in the world are now on the move, and those figures will increase. And so essentially, you could argue it is not so much a problem of number of people, it's where people are situated in areas of the world that are prone to natural disasters, climate change, and obviously disparity in global diets. However, these great historical forces, it's very difficult to manage.
Vous avez bien souligné, M. Wood, qu'on ne mange
10
pas.
seconds.
Did emphasize, Mr. Wood?
Je vais revenir plus tard.
We'll come back later.
Very short. So we now go to MP McPherson. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for being here today and for your testimony. Mr. Woods, I'm going to continue on with you, or Dr. Woods, if I could. One of the things that we know is that right now in the south of Ukraine, it's very difficult for farming that is having huge impacts on the production of food because of the mines that are in place, south and the eastern part. And one of the things that I learned last week, actually, I mean, I know that we have a number of Russians on the sanctions regime or the sanctions list, but what we did find out is that right now, for example, there are Canada exported 193,000 detonators to Kyrgyzstan in 2022, which went up from 0 detonators in 2021. And unfortunately, Kyrgyzstan then exported 115,000 detonators to Ukraine. So in effect, the detonators, it appears, from Canada are actually being used in those mines that are preventing the food security. So when you talk about the interconnectedness of everything, you talk about how we need to do better as a global community, perhaps you could just discuss about the implications of our sanction regime not working effectively and what that means for Ukraine.
And then we have to pay to the
No, that is, well, obviously the sanctions regime is shortly is not working. Mm-hmm. There are things that can be done. I mean, the most obvious one and the simplest one is obviously better regulation of crypto, because 20% of 25% of crypto use is by criminals, and criminals are unusual, and the same with people busting sanctions on behalf of Russia. You don't mind if you lose money, because people are always horrified by how volatile crypto is. If you're a criminal or sanctions buster, you don't care how much money you lose. And this is, of course, why cryptocurrencies haven't gone away. They should have gone away by terms of economic logic. So I think that's the first thing. And then, obviously, the second one is better regulation of tax havens. Thirdly, obviously, which goes back to your Kyrgyzstan point, better understanding of how value chains work. And again, I mean, this was a bit of a sideline. I had a significant British research grant a few years back looking at trying to improve accounting down supply chains. Mm-hmm. So I think the three things: practicality, improved accounting down supply chains, but then also having much tighter restrictions about the flow of money. And that can be done.
And this is, these are detonators that, we do have an arms trade treaty that Canada signs on to that we don't adhere to, obviously. But also the economic implications where Canada is giving millions of dollars to Ukraine to demine their fields at the same time providing the services that actually providing the product that actually produces the mines is of course, pretty counter. Thank you very much for that. And I had a question as well from Ms. Clapp, if I could, or Dr. Clapp. Not sure which one that is. In one of our previous meetings, we had Paul Hagerman. He came in from Canada Food Grains Bank. He talked about the need to balance food security, providing food to people versus the ability for people to have food security in a longer term process. Right now, Canada's ODA, he argued that our balance is not appropriate at this point, that we don't have the adequate balance. There's a couple of questions I have for you with regards to food security on Canada's development window or envelope. One is right now our ODA at just over 0.3% when we have committed to being at 0.7% is too low. We don't have our food indexed, our food aid indexed to the price of food as it increases. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how Canada could do better on providing aid for food, how we could manage that balance better between humanitarian and long-term development.
Thank you very much for that question. And indeed, Paul Hagerman is a good colleague. And I would agree with him that there needs to be a better balance between short-term humanitarian assistance and longer-term assistance for food security, especially in the world's poorest and food import-dependent countries. The provision of humanitarian food assistance is obviously addressing what we consider to be short-term emergencies. And it's unfortunate that the amount of that aid is not indexed to food prices, because when food prices rise, it means that the impact of what Canada is able to provide is definitely weakened. But at the same time, we have to be careful not to rely on humanitarian assistance as a long-term strategy. And that's where the recent reductions in Canada's development assistance overall, including for rural development, is unfortunate. There needs to be more resources put toward increasing that capacity of the poorest countries to produce their own food and to do so sustainably. If Canada can be a leader in providing assistance, for example, for agroecological farming methods that rely less on synthetic fertilizers and fossil fuels, this can go even further to help insulate developing countries from shocks caused by these kinds of events that lead to higher prices across the board: food, energy, and fertilizer.
I think that's my time, Mr. Chair.
you very much, Ms. McPherson. We now go to the second round, and for the second round, we start off with MP Chong. You have 4 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Russia is still exporting natural gas in the form of liquefied natural gas to Europe. Europe is buying billions of dollars of this LNG from Russia. Data I looked up recently showed that in the first 7 months of this year, Russian LNG exports to Europe jumped 40%. The other thing that's happening is that Europe, because it can't get enough natural gas, is switching to burning coal for electricity generation. And we know from the Government of Canada's own data that 1/5 of all global emissions come from coal-fired electricity plants. And a kilowatt hour of electricity generated from coal has double the emissions of a kilowatt hour of electricity generated from gas. On October 9th, 2023, Gregory Ebel, the president of Enbridge, Inc., wrote that Canadian natural gas exports could displace coal in Europe and Asia, and said, quote, have a tremendous impact on reducing global emissions, one far greater than Canada merely achieving its own 2015 net zero commitment, end quote. He further called on the Canadian government to, quote, adopt policies and regulatory measures to enable the responsible and efficient development and export of this important resource while also streamlining permitting processes to better respond to the urgent need for more gas, end quote. So my question for you, Mr. Irving, is do you agree with Mr. Ebel's assertion that increased exports of Canadian natural gas could reduce global greenhouse gas emissions? And if so, why or why not?
I would agree, and I do think we're about to see that in action with the commissioning of the largest private infrastructure project in the history of Canada on the West Coast from LNG Canada that will be taking Western natural gas and sending it to Asian markets. I think one of the interesting effects of natural gas is the slow development toward an internationalization of that commodity. Usually the prices are very regional. They reflect local supply and demand. As natural gas starts being shipped around the world, you might start seeing more of an international global price on it, similar that you see with oil.
So what policies and regulatory measures could the Canadian government take to facilitate greater exports of Canadian LNG?
Unfortunately, I don't have recommendations in that regard. That's probably the area where you might want to talk to a Canadian gas
Let me ask you another question then. According to StatsCan, Canadian energy exports increased last year, driven by an 8% increase in natural gas. The agency added that in 2022, the United States increased exports of LNG to Europe and increased its imports of Canadian natural gas to compensate. Would it not be better for Canada to directly export its own LNG, taking advantage of the higher margins that LNG has vis-a-vis natural gas via pipeline to the United States?
It's a good question, and I think that once LNG Canada is up and operational, we'll have a lot more information and data on that. But you are correct in that, and this speaks actually, I think, to, you talk about international cooperation in energy. Canada and the United States being more interconnected than most any other countries in the world. There's 70 pipelines, 35 electricity interties. We have been able to actually shore up North American reserves, allowing North America to send liquefied natural gas to Europe, which I think has been very advantageous in the conflict that we're seeing.
Thank you for that. We now go to MP Oliphant. You have 4 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and I want to begin by thanking you and the clerk for getting us out of the basement.
I do think it makes a difference. I do think that was a problem. And I want to thank our witnesses who were not able to connect last time for continuing, and I think we will take responsibility for that. I want to go to Professor Clapp and put you on in a difficult position. I'm listening to all our testimony on this area of food, and I'm seeing, trying to discern Canada's role, and I want you to help me a little bit with priorities. And I know we want everything, and everybody always wants everything, but trying to look at what Canada's role would be. And I'm looking at, delivery of food and increasing production in Canada and getting food out of our country into places where they need food and have it at affordable prices. Money, dollars for developing countries to buy food. We need to increase that, obviously, but that's also a cost. Development, long-term development, as you've been talking about in terms of yields, in terms of sustainable production, in terms of actually having countries be able to create their own food chains, supply chains, particularly in Africa, but not only in Africa. And then diplomacy and multilateral activity, working on all the ways in which countries, particularly in the developing world, do this, the exchange of ideas, laws, sanctions, promotions, engagement at that diplomatic level. So there's sort of 4, and there's probably more, but in my head right now there are 4 areas. Can you help me a little bit with where you think this committee should be pushing government on our priorities in the area of food security? Sorry for the hard question to make you.
Yeah.
Because I know you're going to say everything.
Difficult question, and certainly a lot on the table with respect to the question. I think in terms of what needs to be done, we have to think short-term and also long-term. Immediately dealing with the crisis of food insecurity, it's important for Canada to support efforts towards debt relief. We know that the debt problem is quite dire at the moment in most food import dependent developing countries and is set to get worse. And so Canada can support international efforts to relieve debt because we don't want countries having to choose between feeding their populations and paying foreign debts. So that's, I think, something that can be done, but it can be done alongside other measures, the measures of providing humanitarian assistance, for example. But I would caution against Canada trying to break into, say, for example, wheat export markets to new, regions like in sub-Saharan Africa, because the kind of wheat that Russia and Ukraine have been selling to sub-Saharan Africa, it's a different quality of wheat than what Canada produces. It's lower protein content and it's significantly cheaper. So I don't think Canada is going to be able to, sort of think about breaking into those markets necessarily. I think it's better to provide global markets generally, which can provide liquidity on those markets, which can help reduce prices. And I think that's what is necessary for those countries, depending on food imports and the continued provision of humanitarian assistance. All of those things can be done immediately, but I don't think those immediate steps necessarily preclude taking the longer term steps towards thinking more strategically and carefully about what we need to do to transition to more sustainable forms of agriculture. I think we need to have that conversation in Canada, but also throughout the assistance that Canada provides internationally. So I don't know if I answered your question completely, but I appreciate it, and I don't want to take up too much more of your time.
A staged response. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Oliphant. We now go to Mr. Bergeron. You have 2 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will go on in the same vein as my previous question. Mr. Wood, you did show that everyone in the world does not eat enough to satisfy their hunger and doesn't have the same level of calories in their daily diet. Ms. Clapp, in a international panel of experts on food systems, published a report in March 2023 stating that Never again should countries have to choose between repaying debts and ensuring people are fed. Would you say that you agree with that statement of this international panel of experts on which sat Professor Clapp, that seems to say that in some developing countries, one of the issues that becomes problematic at the food level is the difficult financial situation experienced by these countries?
The first is a regulatory point. The world does need to regulate vulture funds better. Actually, I did a book on hedge funds quite recently, but one of the issues is this issue of vulture funds. Until that is regulated, there's a structural problem. The other point about it is some countries are not going to be viable as places to live. And this is more than food production. Some parts of countries are not going to be viable as places to live. And again, this transcends food production. Nobody's ever moved a megacity. But if you speak to climate geographers, they'll say that you may have to move Delhi, you may have to move Beijing, you may even have to move LA. So there are, and with that, of course, once you have those kind of big movements of people, even within countries, that changes fundamentally the basis of food production, it challenges the basis of food supplies. So there are big structural things. So to take away two things, first, regulation of vulture funds in terms of debt, particularly with an age of high interest rates, and secondly, what to plan for the future about some countries not being viable anymore, some bigger cities not being viable anymore.
Thank you very much. We now go to Madam McPherson. You have the final questions, and you have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. Just one quick comment I wanted to make. I mean, we talk about food insecurity and the need to invest in food insecurity, and I think Mr. Beasley, who was the past head of the World Food Program, said it best when he said that you have the opportunity to pay for people to pay now, or to pay 1,000 times more down the road. So just something I wanted to reiterate. Ms. Ackerman, I wonder if I could ask you a few questions, or a question. You spoke about the need to rebuild Ukraine. I was in Ukraine in March. I spoke to members of the government who were very, very eager to rebuild. But you speak about the need to rebuild in a green and sustainable way and how important that is for Ukrainians. And from my perspective, it would be a mistake to rebuild using old technologies that are not forward-looking. I wonder if you could just take a moment to tell us a little bit more about that, please.
Thank you for this question. That's absolutely the case. As I said, Ukrainians want to build back better. We are already designing a system, as we also have many questions about, how transparent the process be, how good it will be made. And anybody can go now to the website called dream.gov.ua, where all of the reconstruction projects will be stored in one place and accessible to everyone, so that anybody could see at any moment, from community launching the project till the end, how it looks like, who is implementing it, and what is the final result. And the standards that Ukraine has at the moment, are construction standards, building standards, they're okay. But of course, if we build in for the next generations, and this is something that I was mentioning, right, with renewable energy, with autonomous housing and so on, we don't really yet have the examples to follow. We have the EU standards, which we need to implement in the coming years, and it will be a big, big job now, of course, as Ukraine is following the path of integration into the EU. And this is something where we really need support. If we think about any passive building, for example, building that does not consume energy thanks to renewables and so on, we don't have a single example yet in Ukraine of such a building. So if we want to build for the future, we need to be thinking together, and we already have some great cooperation happening and some big general plans being developed at the moment. For example, the southern region of Mykolaiv is working with Denmark on rebuilding the region and the city that was heavily destroyed, with many public buildings destroyed and so on. And they are thinking about rebuilding, they are rethinking the city, how to rebuild it, how to change the concept of what the city actually is. And this is what we need. Of course, some of the cities, not all of the cities in Ukraine are destroyed at all. Many are already there. So we have to be thinking about more things like energy efficiency and so on. And one more last thing, is that we have to be thinking about the new economy for Ukraine. This is why I was mentioning the concept of the green economy for Ukraine, to not get stuck in things that we've been producing already for many years, for decades, but to make sure that we are moving forward. And what that actually means, I think we don't yet have the clarity. And this is where we have to have these conversations, and international partners should also be able to, could contribute to actually make sure that we understand what Ukraine could be producing, again, for us and for the world. And as the reconstruction will be a big scale project for everyone, this is where we could also put the hands on and see how this could develop
I'm afraid we're
into this new
out
green
of time,
economy.
Ms. Ackerman.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That now concludes our first panel of witnesses. Allow me to thank all of you for your insights, for your expertise, and for your time. And let me once again apologize to Professor Wood, Professor Clapp, and Ms. Ackerman for having had some challenges in the past, but we're grateful that you went out of your way, you made the effort to share your expertise with us today. Thank you very much. I'll just remind the members, we're going to require about 4 to 5 minutes before we get the second lineup of witnesses. Thank you. and the study of the situation at the Russia-Ukraine border and implications for peace and security. I'd like to welcome our witnesses. We're very grateful to have with us Mr. Trevor Kennedy, who's here with us in person. Mr. Kennedy is the Vice President of Trade and International Policy at the Business Council of Canada. And virtually, we're grateful that we have Mr. Normand Mousseau, who is the Scientific Director and Professor at the Trottier Energy Institute at the University of Montreal, as well as Mr. Sylvain Charlebois, who is the Director of Agri-Food Analytics Lab and Professor at Dalhousie University. So you will each get opening remarks for 5 minutes. I would just ask that when you see this phone up, that means you should be wrapping up within 15 to 20 seconds. We will start off with Mr. Kennedy. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and for this opportunity to speak to this committee about the Russian invasion of Ukraine and implications for global peace and security. The Business Council of Canada is comprised of 170 chief executives and entrepreneurs of Canada's leading enterprises. Many members lead global businesses with extensive trade and investment interests all around the world. Following Russia's brutal invasion of Ukraine, companies quickly severed ties with Russia and have steadfastly supported Ukraine. Canadian businesses have also worked to alleviate supply chain disruptions stemming from the war. Canadian potash producers like Nutrien increased output to help our partners reduce their reliance on Russian and Belarusian suppliers. Cameco is supplying Ukraine with Ukraine's energy utility with nuclear fuel to safeguard its energy security and independence for years to come. And these are just a few examples of many. As the war rages on, it's important that Canada remain engaged to support Ukraine and Ukrainian businesses. And we can't wait for the war to end to start rebuilding. And so to strengthen our economic ties, as the Ukrainian ambassador to Canada has mentioned before, Yulia Kovalev, Ukraine's economy is the third front in the war. That's why the Business Council of Canada is proud to support the Canada-Ukraine Chamber of Commerce for its second Rebuild Ukraine Business Conference taking place this week in Toronto. Our President and CEO, Goldie Hyder, as well as other members of the business community, will participate in this important and timely conference and highlight the needs and opportunities to rebuild and modernize Ukraine's economy. We also support the recent modernization of the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement. This agreement brings important new chapters and provisions to our bilateral trade agreement, including covering trade and services. It will also create an environment of predictability and stability for our bilateral trade and investment flows. Our Ukrainian friends and partners have been clear how important this deal is to demonstrate to Canadians that Ukraine is open for business and that businesses can have confidence in the market in the long term. We agree and we urge parliamentarians to swiftly ratify this deal. We've also urged Export Development Canada to put in place war risk insurance and 2-year export credits to help support Canadian companies who wish to trade and invest with Ukraine. As our CEO wrote to EDC 2 weeks ago, credit agencies from Germany, France, Japan, United Kingdom, Sweden, Poland, and the Netherlands are all providing political and/or risk insurance for companies in their respective countries who are investing in Ukraine. Similar programs have been put in place by the United States. And so Canada has promised to support Ukraine, and we agree with EDC President Murray Lavery that EDC can play a pivotal role in supporting Ukraine's long-term reconstruction. The conflict in Ukraine also and deteriorating global situation highlights the need for Canada to step up and play a more active role in peace and security. We welcome Canada's material support to Ukraine. The war also underscores the importance of the NATO alliance in safeguarding Europe and North America. Canada must at a minimum meet its 2% defense spending commitment. It was once commonplace across the alliance for countries to miss this target, but following this war, many NATO members have either increased their spending or outlined plans to reach that level, and Canada cannot be an outlier. The war marked a turning point in the global economy. Economic security is now a priority all across the world, and many nations less blessed with natural resources than Canada are preoccupied with securing a safe supply of energy, food, and other natural resources. Many like-minded partners are looking to Canada to be that reliable and safe supplier. In the summer of 2022, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz visited Canada and clearly stated his country's interest in Canadian energy, including LNG, as well as hydrogen and critical minerals to power its economy today and into the future. This visit was followed by South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol in September of 2022 and Japanese Prime Minister Kishida Fumio earlier this year. In both cases, North Pacific leaders clearly expressed their desire to enhance economic and energy security through closer economic partnerships and linkages to Canada. Finally, when European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen visited Canada in March this year, the EU outlined how important Canada is as a partner as it pursues a reliable supply of energy and raw materials. Among other issues, leaders committed to a Canada-EU working group on energy transition and LNG to identify and advance medium-term solutions. As European leadership returns to Canada this week for the Canada-EU summit, we hope to see concrete progress towards supporting our partners and allies in Europe. We believe Canada has an important role to play in ensuring Ukraine wins this war and thrives in the years ahead. Canada also has an important role to play in as a stabilizing force in the world, and business leaders are eager to partner with government whenever possible to support a more peaceful and prosperous world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kennedy. We will now go to Mr. Mousseau. Mr. Mousseau, you have 5 minutes.
Merci. Je remercie le...
Thank you. I'd like to thank the committee for having invited me. Before starting, I would like to say that my expertise is mainly about the Canadian energy system, so I'm not an expert in international relations or on the energy system in Ukraine and Europe, but we know that energy systems are interconnected. In that aspect, I could contribute in a relevant way. I also want to say that the invitation came very soon, so I wasn't ready to create a text for this. I would say that the invasion of Ukraine by Russia really deeply affected the global energy system because of the uncertainty that was created and also because various embargoes were instituted consequently. And that created a change in the situation of fossil fuel distribution and also showed the importance for various countries to reduce their fossil fuel dependence on Russia and their dependence on energy produced outside the countries. But in the end, this crisis did not lead to a significant decrease in total demand. There was a decrease in Russian production in 22-23. But at the global level, there was not a major reduction. What we saw instead was a redistribution of resources. Where there were embargoes faced by certain countries, they turned to new producers, leaving fuel available for countries without embargoes who could profit from Russian oil at reduced prices, which led to a similar quantity of production with transfers in terms of costs and dependencies. In North America, the direct impact of the crisis on energy except for oil for a very short period, were limited. But it allowed North America and the U.S. especially to position themselves in the world as the prime exporters of LNG, liquefied natural gas, which changed the situation. The U.S. were not a major player before then. Canada did not really benefit from that transition. First of all, we have a few port projects that aren't very advanced. So there is a LNG port project for Canada, which will be open soon, but it would take at least 2 years. So we weren't in a situation of being able to profit from this transformation. The details go further. The fact that Europe is changing, that reduction of dependence on energy from foreign sources, mean that it accelerates the energy transition measures and wanting to turn to more reliable countries. So in Europe, they'll turn to Morocco for solar energy or other types. And we also want to identify other sources for fossil fuels, so the U.S. for LNG, but the European Union is still the main client for Russian natural gas. And the access to cheaper fossil fuels in China and India and other countries that are profiting from Russian oil might have an effect of slowing down the transition in Europe because costs are lower. If we think about Canada, the infrastructure for LNG export in Canada are going to be built a bit too late. So it's too late to say that we want to multiply our export places because there are difficulties with those ports, and we're a bit late on the world scale. The production of green hydrogen, we have agreements. The structure is still very light, but can Canada position itself there? Potentially, yes. This might be interesting income in a world where everyone wants to become more independent in terms of renewable energy. We may have pressures for these same supply chains on a world level. And Canada has relatively little structure for renewable energy and will find itself in a difficult situation to even meet its own climate goals. And I would say that the pressure from Europe that wants to decarbonize its energy, for whom it's expensive, well, that will accelerate the development of a export tax of goods that are not decarbonized. And that can also affect Canada. I will stop here. Thank you.
Merci.
Monsieur Mousseau. We will now, I'm sorry, we just realized that the sound check for Mr. Charlebois did not work the first time around, so we're just going to try once again, so I just ask for your patience. I'm going to suspend for no more than 2 minutes. Okay, we will now resume. Bienvenue, Monsieur Charlebois. You have 5
Welcome, Mr. Charlebois.
remarks.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, honourable members of the Parliamentary Committee on Foreign Affairs and International Development. It is my privilege to present before you today as we deliberate on the significant strides our nation is making in global trade and diplomacy, particularly through the Canadian-Ukrainian Trade Agreement Implementation Act. This landmark legislation not only fortifies our international trade relationships, but also opens new avenues for Canadian agri-food industries, which are pivotal to our economy and societal well-being. Canada's agri-food sector stands at a crucial juncture, poised for transformative growth and international expansion. The implementation of this agreement with Ukraine, a nation with vast agricultural potential and complementary trade needs, presents unique opportunities for Canadian producers, processors, and exporters. In this context, I wish to put forth 3 key recommendations that are instrumental in maximizing the benefits of this agreement for our agri-food sector. Firstly, investment in agricultural technology and innovation should be prioritized. This agreement provides an avenue for Canadian agri-food businesses to assess new markets and adopt advanced agricultural technologies. Emphasizing innovation will not only enhance the productivity and sustainability of Canadian agri-food businesses, but also position Canada as a global leader in agricultural technology. We should encourage partnerships between Canadian and Ukrainian entities in research and development, focusing on sustainable farming practices, climate resilience, and advanced food processing technologies. Secondly, it is imperative to strengthen supply chain infrastructure. The expansion of trade with Ukraine necessitates robust and efficient supply chains. Investment in transportation, infrastructure, storage facilities, and digital supply chain solution is critical. This will ensure the smooth movement of goods, reduce logistical bottlenecks, and mitigate risks associated with international trade. Enhancing supply chain resilience will also prepare our agri-food sector to effectively respond to global food security challenges. Thirdly, I recommend the development of a comprehensive market access strategy. While the agreement opens doors, Canadian agri-food businesses need support in navigating the Ukrainian market. This strategy should include trade promotion activities, market intelligence services, and guidance on regulatory compliance in Ukraine. Establishing a Canadian-Ukrainian Agri-Food Business Council could be a strategic step in this direction as well, fostering bilateral trade relationship and providing Canadian businesses with the insights and networks needed to succeed in the Ukrainian market. In conclusion, the Canadian-Ukrainian Free Trade Agreement Implementation Act heralds a new era in our trade relations, offering significant prospects for the Canadian agri-food sector. By focusing on technological innovation, strengthening supply chain infrastructure, and developing a comprehensive market access strategy, we can fully leverage the potential of this agreement, bolstering our economy and reinforcing Canada's position as a global leader in agri-food. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to present these recommendations, and I look forward to a fruitful discussion on these matters.
Thank you, Mr. Charlebois. We now go to the members for questions. For the first round, each member is provided four minutes, and we start off with MPM.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for appearing today. 8 billion people on this planet, 4 million of which owe their lives to synthetic fertilizers producing the food that they eat. So I want to start with fertilizer and Dr. Charlebois. As I understand, $115 million in tariffs have been collected by Canada on Russian and Belarusian imports into Canada. Who is paying that cost? Who's paying the price of that? And who is bearing the cost, particularly in the concept of Canada as a trading nation and in the context that we're the only country of the G7 imposing that tariff?
Thank you very much for the question. I assume it's a rhetorical question because I think we all know what the answer is to that question. Obviously, Canadian farmers paid for that, and I believe it was unjust. I believe that money is still owed to our farmers. Penalizing farmers is certainly something that we shouldn't be accepting in this country, unfortunately. They don't have any way to get that money back unless the government helps them.
Last month at the Standing Ag Committee, you made the following statement. When the issue of world food security comes up, Canada is unfortunately barely a part of the discussion, and that's something that has to change. In your testimony, you stated, and I agree with you, that Canada is a global ag tech leader. We have massive amounts of export potash. We should be exporting all sorts of nitrogen fertilizer. The only macro element we're short a bit on is phosphorus. Why are we not on the world stage from food security? And I could expand this to energy security, but let's start with food security.
Yes, again, good question. I would say Canada is a strong innovator, but we innovate for ourselves mainly. We don't tend to think globally. And we're obviously undermined by other forces around the world. We are prisoners of our own geography. We're just north of the U.S., so there's lots of noise south of us. And that's why we need to be proactive and deliberate in our way we support different nations around the world, starting with Ukraine. And I think that there's an opportunity here for Canada to play a leadership role. And so far, to be honest, some of the measures have been they're not been clear. The intent here has not been clear. And I do believe that there are many, many companies in Canada that can actually play a role. When it comes to fertilizers in particular, I do think that we need to question our strategy for exports in general. I have some reservations in terms of the Canpotex model itself. Perhaps we could do more instead of supply managed production in order to keep prices higher. I think in 2023, going into 2024, we need a different approach.
I heard your third call in your testimony for increased infrastructure investments in Canada, both for domestic, as I understand, and obviously our world export needs. Can you be more specific? What specific? I I mean, our rail infrastructure heading to the East Coast is limited. It's hauling crude oil as opposed to potash, which I used on my farm. I wish I could have used less Belarus over the years and more Saskatchewan. Is that one example?
It is one example. So I would say there are several issues with our food supply chain. The first most important issue, I think, is the fact that it is not considered as an essential service across the country. That needs to be done. We need to protect the integrity of our food supply chain. When it comes to infrastructure, Canada is not a leader. When you travel around the world, often Canada is seen as a problem. Let's start with ports. There was a report recently ranking 348 ports around the world. The three main ports in Canada, Halifax, Montreal, and Vancouver, ranked in lower tier. Vancouver, out of 348 ports, ranked 347th out of 348th. So just that, I think we need to recognize that more investments are required.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, MP Epp. We now go to MP Zuberi. You have 4 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to all witnesses for being here.
Start off with Mr. Kennedy, and you made some remarks around global security, defense security, Canada's investments. Do you have any opinions about our protection of the North, how we can enhance it, and what that means for Canada's peace and security, and what sort of investments do you think would be important to have around defense of the North?
Thank you for the question. And I think rather than focusing on what assets we need to provide security for ourselves and for our allies, we do hear loud and clear when traveling the world and meeting with our counterparts how important Canada is. The Arctic is certainly of great interest to our partners, whether it be the United States or our partners in Europe or in the North Pacific. This is Canada's backyard. We should have capacity to be an important actor in that part of the world and supporting our allies. So, and we do think it's important at this time, especially as many of our peers and allies increase defense spending and make more serious commitments for the long term, that Canada do the same to provide support for our naval and air force capacity.
I'm assuming you would agree that that would enhance Canada's stature on the international stage, along with promoting peace, security, and diplomacy.
Absolutely, and in fact, just recently, we witnessed around the world there are instances at times when new groupings are formed that sometimes Canada is not necessarily involved from the outset. It's not always tied to security and defense, but that's one area where Canada can step up and make itself certainly more helpful to our partners, and that will lead to more, I think, invitations for Canada to play a leading role in new institutions as they're formed.
Thank you. Donc, je veux poser d'autres questions à Monsieur.
I will ask other questions to Mr. Mousseau.
Pour le futur,
for the future, do you have any thoughts on the needs for oil and natural gas? Or the demand? Are we at a point where the demand is higher, and perhaps in the future it may be less important in terms of the global energy needs? Thank you for your question. I would say that it depends on many things. People have committed to decrease their needs of greenhouse gas generating fuels for around 2050. So we can't maintain the same level of production as we have now. And already there is a slowing of demand at the global level. We haven't reached the maximum of production, but there is a trend that seems to indicate a decrease at the global way within 10 years or so. So I'll give you 30 seconds to add any other comments you'd like to add. So I would say that the issue, to my mind, is that Canada is a bit late for liquefied, renewable liquid natural gas. And so now we have to do a lot of building the ports that we didn't build a few years ago, and that does not concord with our goals for decreasing emissions by 2050. We'll have ports that will be in place, but they'll be able to we'll be able to sell LNG for 20 or so years, and it's difficult to recoup our costs in that time.
MP Bergeron, you have 4 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Chair. I have questions for Mr. Mousseau. First of all, thank you to all the witnesses for being with us today. Mr. Mousson, I was very interested by your 2 conclusions. The first, which you've just mentioned again in answering a question of my colleague, MP Zuberi, and the other on the fact that how we need to position ourselves in a market that's in a high rate of development. So the gas and oil industry is already an industry of the past, and that explains in part why you're saying it's a bit too late. But it's important to move quickly to position ourselves in terms of the energy uses of the future. And you're talking about portable energy production that's decarbonized. What are you referring to? You can produce decarbonized electricity, but it's quite difficult to export that electricity. We have to export it in gas or liquid form, ammonia or hydrogen, or it could be products, aluminum or other problems that require a lot of energy to manufacture them. Here's a way of exporting our decarbonized energy. That's what I was referring to. So does technology now allow us to produce these portable decarbonized energies, or is that what you're encouraging us to study, the possibility of investing in these technologies so we can be well positioned for the future? There's much investments that still needs to be made to develop the technology and to create business models. Currently, the business models for these energies are not very. We're not very certain that they will be successful. There are many gaps there, and the countries that will be producing this kind of energy won't have margins of profits that are so great as those for oil and gas. So there's a lot of work to be done to assess the approaches, to build the infrastructures, but also evaluate the necessary technology. For example, currently there is no equivalent of a port to transport hydrogen by sea. So we need to develop IP and technologies, and that's where Canada could do some work. So the cost of these technologies might need to decrease over time. So they're costly to put in place, but eventually when they're bought by a larger and larger number of countries, maybe the cost of these technology will decrease over time. That's not very sure. If we look at fuel cells that use hydrogen, there has been a plateau for the last 10 years. No major changes have been added. So the production of hydrogen by electrolysis is very difficult. But we could look at blue hydrogen, where we can take fossil fuels, transform them to hydrogen, and stock the CO2, store it here. There'll be massive investments in the country in order to do that. And that's an interesting possibility. But there's a lot of development to be carried out. But every month we're superseded by other competitors. Thank you.
You have 4 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much for the testimony from all of our witnesses today. I am struggling, though. Like my thought process here is that what we're hearing from the testimony is that if we had put in place infrastructure, we would be able to provide Canadian energy to markets that require it. But we didn't. And my understanding is that this is not something that we should have invested in the last 8 years, but something in the last 15 or 20 years. So both conservative and liberal administrations were not able to get the infrastructure in place that we would have required to be able to be in a position that we would provide this Canadian energy. Add to that the idea that we are hearing from our partners abroad. Last year at this time, I met with Chancellor Scholz. I met with the head of the Chancellor in Germany, and they spoke about wanting our energy, but not wanting it in the long term, wanting it in a very short window of time. We just heard from testimony from Ms. Ackerman, who spoke about how Ukrainians really do clearly want to rebuild in a sustainable green fashion. So help me understand how this isn't a bit of a unicorn study where we say, wouldn't it be great if we had done things differently? We didn't, but we should study why we should have. I'm struggling to find out what this is all about, because frankly, the situation that we're in right now is that we need to transition. We need to for climate change. We need to because those people, those industries and those countries we're working with want us to. So not having a port that will take 5 to 10 years to build is bad. But the fact of the matter is that it's not going to be required the same way in 5 to 10 years. And I don't understand the business case of that, I guess. I'm struggling with it. Absolutely, I think it would be fantastic if we could replace Russian natural gas right now. I just don't understand kind of what we're talking about here, I guess. Mr. Kennedy, I'm gonna ask you to see if you can clarify this for me.
Well, thank you very much. I just returned from a trip to Japan and Korea. We had a chance to meet with many of our partners in industry and in government, and I'll just be very direct in that it's not too late, and there are very high expectations for Canada, but it's not just about LNG. But LNG is absolutely part of the picture. It's a case of there are three things that the world is looking to Canada for, particularly when it comes to energy. It's LNG, it's critical minerals, and it's hydrogen. And all three are critically important to our partners, whether they be in the North Pacific or in Europe. In the case of LNG, I think we understand that we would be primarily exporting to the Indo-Pacific to support energy supplies for our partners in Europe rather than directly shipping to Europe.
Sorry to interrupt, but for how long? And how long do you, when you say we're not out of time, how long does it take us to get the infrastructure that's available? And then in that case, how long do they want natural gas? We've heard from the International Energy Agency that the use of fossil fuel technology, that it is peaking this decade. So
it's a great question, and honestly, the most important point, particularly in dealing with our partners in the North Pacific, is the concept of diversification. Even if demand falls for the next 20, 30 years, what our partners want is a safe supply from their like-minded partners like Canada. We have an advantage through geography and through also our clean process here in Canada to provide our resources. So if demand falls globally, there still is demand for Canadian LNG and also other Canadian resources. So I think it's important to make that distinction. Currently, we don't export any LNG to countries like Japan. LNG Canada is of critical national security importance to Japan. We heard that.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I know I just have such little time, but I'm sorry. But could you just tell me how much? We just heard that it would be very difficult for us to pay back the cost of building this infrastructure, and you are talking about the next 10, 20 years. In your mind, there's a business case for investing in the infrastructure, knowing the short time frame that we have to recoup those losses?
Absolutely.
If you could respond in 15 seconds.
Absolutely. Please. Speaking with industry, there is a business case. Every project has different economics behind it, but LNG Canada in particular is what's a national security interest to countries like Japan and Korea.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. So we now go to the second round, and for the second round, we start off with MP Alghabra. You have 3 minutes. Oh, My apologies. Yes, we go to Mr. MP Abdul Taif. You have 3 minutes. My apologies.
Thank you, Chair. International Energy Agency forecasts peak in global demand for coal, natural gas, and oil. And the U.S. increased export of LNG in 2022 to Europe, where they rely on Canada natural gas to compensate. Why the United States is increasing its LNG export. Professor Mousseau, please.
Essentiellement parce qu'on a beaucoup de gaz de schiste.
Essentially because there's a lot of schist gas, and we're able to produce a lot of that. And the U.S. has a capacity as well.
Export of natural gas could reduce green gas emission. Why and why not?
En fait, quand on regarde le gaz naturel,
if we look at liquefied natural gas that goes to Japan, studies of the American Energy Agency show that greenhouse gases in comparison to carbon are negligible. So liquefied gas environmentally is not very interesting when it is produced by shale gas.
LNG on Canadian natural gas then?
Parce qu'on peut l'acheter pas cher. Donc, en fait,
because it can be bought cheaply. Canada has only had one client for a high percentage of energy, and that's the U.S. So in that case, it's the client that decides, not the seller that decides on the price.
Kennedy can weigh on this same question, please.
Well, I'll just repeat my previous remarks that we understand there's significant interest and there is a business case. International investors have expressed their interest in investing in Canada if we had the right regulatory certainty and predictability in Canada, and if there was a clear signal that that investment was welcome here. I also wanted to add one other point I didn't raise in the three areas that there's interest. There's also interest in nuclear. Canada as a source of nuclear fuel, but also for technology for SMRs and more conventional nuclear electricity.
Professor Mousseau, you note that Canada is the only G7 country that has a greenhouse gas emission increased since 2010. So, which means this is an indirect call for a reduction in Canada's export and production of energy products. So if Canada has to decrease its oil and gas production and export to meet emission targets, would you expect other producers to increase their production and exports in light of increase in demand nationally, internationally?
If I could ask that you keep your response limited to 20 seconds, please.
Donc, si le reste du monde...
So if the rest of the world follows their own objectives, well, the answer would be that demand will decrease everywhere. So Canadian reductions will not be taken up by foreign partners.
Mr. Abultaif, we now go to MP El Gabriel. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank our witnesses for being here today. It's clear, I think there is a consensus, at least an intellectual one, that we need to, we are in a transition period and we need to reduce emissions to combat climate change. However, with the war in Ukraine, with supply chain challenges, with the rising cost of living, we appear to be dealing with a perceived conflict. There are those who are saying, in order to deal with all those challenges, their resolve to transition is weakening, and they're advocating for traditional methods of production or transportation. I'm interested in hearing from Mr. Mousseau or Charles on your points of view on this issue, because we do have to have a fundamental discussion about tackling, obviously, the challenges that we're facing today, but also the issue of climate change and our production methods. Mr. Mousseau?
Oui.
I would say that the problem is that reaching our climate goals can't be done magically. In order to do it, one has to decide that we want to decrease the emissions of greenhouse gases. It's not something that happens from the exterior. We have to have a true desire to do it, a plan that leads us somewhere. And there, we're subject to external conditions which will make it more difficult or easier. But it's really a question of a political decision. If we want to do it, we have to accept that sometimes it will be more difficult than others, and demonstrate flexibility, a capacity to adapt. And it's in that context that we have to think of the transition. This transition is not something that we're subjected to from outside in the same sense as a crisis in Ukraine or other situations happening in the world.
Great question. I just wanted to add to Mr. Mousseau's comments. I do agree with Mr. Mousseau. I think there needs to be some political will, but also the way measures are communicated needs to change. We are seeing many policies, environmental policies, helping industry to decarbonize, and I think we need to decarbonize as much as possible. It is a priority for agriculture and agri-food. It is the number one threat. Climate change is the number one threat to agriculture, no doubt. But mechanisms that are put in place would require measurable results. And right now, and I'm thinking specifically about the carbon tax right now, we need measurable metrics, allowing Canadians to understand why we're doing things to decarbonize the economy.
Thank you. You're out of time. Yeah, my apologies. We now go to Mr. Bergeron. You have a minute and a half, Mr. Bergeron.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. The National Director of the International Energy Agency, Fatih Birol, stated after the publication of the last forecasts of the agency last October that he anticipated that the global demand for coal, oil, and natural gas would peak now. And given the volatility in traditional energy markets, statements saying that oil and gas are safe and secure supply for the natural for the planet are good. Well, I'm not a specialist in climate change, but we cannot reach our climate goals if we increase our consumption of oil, gas, and coal. Thank you, Chair.
Final minute and a half to MP McPherson.
Very much. And again, thank you to all our witnesses. Mr. Kennedy, you spoke about regulatory certainty. You know we have some challenges with that in this country. We have provincial jurisdiction. We've signed on, as we should have, to things like the UNDRIP declaration. But when you look at regulatory certainty, I think the one thing I wanted to just get some clarity on, right now in my province, the provincial government has actually paused renewables, any investment in renewables. The quotes we've heard is that about $33 million worth of investment has fled the province because of that, and multiple thousands of jobs. Would you agree that that provides significant regulatory uncertainty in green technologies and green energy?
I'm not familiar with that specific decision, but I would say that businesses greatly value predictability and stability, and that's a clear message, I think, to all jurisdictions in Canada, that if you want investment, predictable, clear sets of rules, reliable rules are extremely important, particularly for many international investors.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, MP McPherson. At this point, allow me to thank all three of our witnesses, Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Charlebois, and Monsieur Mousseau. Very, very grateful for your time and for your expertise. And we will be adjourning this meeting. But before I do so, I was wondering if the members have had a chance to look at the two budgets that were sent. One is a revised budget for this specific study, since we had technical problems hearing from a few of the witnesses. Another one is for a briefing that you have asked in a week and a half. So do we have unanimous consent?
Yeah,
unanimous
so
consent?
move.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. That meeting stands adjourned.